Hey guys, welcome back to Joko Yo, and we're going to just keep hitting it again. Hope you had a good week and a good last few days, and as long as there are stories, I'm going to try to tell them, and I appreciate you listening. I really do. It's way bigger than I thought it would ever be, and makes me very, very happy. But today, this is sort of a continuation off of the last episode. I don't know what got into me. I got thinking about scary movies, and well, I haven't watched one. I don't know. I don't really like them either. But anyway, here's this one. Between February 1692 and March 1693, more than 200 people were accused of witchcraft in the town of Salem, Massachusetts. 30 were found guilty. 19 were executed by hanging, 14 women and 5 men. One man was executed by pressing him to death, and at least 5 died in jail. In a day and age where being a witch gets you a multi-million-dollar book series aimed for young adults, a multi-million-dollar film series — I'm a huge fan of both, by the way — the thought that witchcraft was a capital offense, punishable by death, instead of making you eligible for an elite boarding school? Well, I mean, a person in Colonial, Massachusetts would think that we were in an upside-down world. Witchcraft was scary to them. It meant that you were in communion with the devil himself. Those pilgrims and Puritans, man, they took that stuff seriously. You see, they came to a very harsh climate to settle. Imagine trying to make a life, to grow food and such in coastal Massachusetts without modern technologies, and all they had were seeds that were suited for European climates. It was literally going to take a village, working together to make it. Everybody was going to have to depend on each other. They were all in it together, and the system worked. The New England community became very community-oriented. It shouldn't come as a shock that social systems like police, fire, public libraries, and such originated in New England or out of the minds of people that were born there. They had to have each other to make it. I mean, the Boston Tea Party 100 years later after the witch trials wasn't so much about tea as it was a rebellion against the rule of outsiders. That's how the Boston Massacre could be seen by the British as an unfortunate effect of putting down a potential rebellion, and by the people of Boston as outsiders killing citizens in an unnecessary massacre. The same event seen 2 different ways. Early on, they found that the way to make it was to depend on one another. This was the way God had shown them, through community bonds. A different way, going outside of the community and their compacts and their agreements, was to go outside of what God had shown them to do, and therefore outside of God's will. And knowingly going outside of God's will was, by definition, going against God. And going against God was siding with the bad guy. So therefore, if you looked outside the community, you were in alliance with the one you don't want to be in an alliance with. The people had all kinds of names for the bad guy. Old Scratch is one of my favorites. They also called him the Old Deluder or Old Liar. So, see, like police, fire, libraries, and such, the New Englanders also created the first public schools, paid for by the community. It was of the people, to make them all stronger as a group, to promote the learning of truth. And the learning of truth was to cast out lies, and the casting out of lies was to prevent the influence of the old deluder, the old liar. In fact, the very first law in American history promoting public schools was in Massachusetts for this very purpose, aptly called the Old Deluder Act. The first law to promote public schools was designed to keep out Satan. See, outside things were to be treated with distrust and suspicion. So when smallpox took hold, for example, people trusted in the old remedies, and when some of the better traveled of them learned about inoculation techniques against smallpox brought from West Africa, many thought that it was from outside. Therefore, it was from the old deluder, and people refused the smallpox vaccine because they thought it was not of God. Some people just don't learn. Until people that got it started feeling better. Which brings us back to the Salem witch trials. And, so what if people wanted to be witches? Big deal. It's not like being a witch is contagious or anything, unlike smallpox. They wouldn't inoculate against a contagion like smallpox, but they would execute witches? Okay, whatever. Well, it really wasn't about witches at all. The heinous punishments of lashing and hanging were more about letting others see, making the brutality of the punishments serve as deterrents to others who might think of doing the same thing. Lashings weren't about beating the devil out of a person that was convicted of committing a crime, but about beating the devil out of a spectator that was watching the beating or hanging that up to then had thought about doing the same thing. Salem, Massachusetts was going through some pretty big changes in the 1690s. New people were moving in around Salem, bringing new ideas and new opportunities. Such things threatened to completely unravel the old system that had worked for, at least for them. Tension was heightened even more by the mistrust that came with new people. Property lines, grazing rights, church attendance, everything had been tightened up, become tense. The Putnams were the old family of Salem and bedrocks of the Puritan groups in Salem. They were also the biggest employers. They hired townspeople to help them build ships. That's the way it had been done. They were involved in the church, and then the Porters came. The Porter family was richer and much more entrepreneurial. They worked in agriculture and also in shipbuilding, becoming a competitor to the Putnam family. They were outsiders, and they were changing things. It doesn't take much of a leap of imagination to think that the Putnams could possibly see the Porters as perhaps even evil. They're from the outside and sent from the old deluder himself to unravel things. Now, what's for certain is that the Putnams were afraid of the Porters, and they worked to make others suspicious of them too. Not just the Porters, but everyone who affiliated with them. Accusations began, the trials followed, Massachusetts changed, and people got accused of witchcraft. What's that got to do with Johnston County? I thought you'd never ask. See, it wasn't easy here either in Johnston County. Sure, we didn't have to suffer New England winters, but it was pretty harsh making a life in the early days. Those that were seen as doing so were seen by many as heroes. Man, look what they did for us. People like Needham Bryan, his brother William, William's son Lewis, William and Needham's father-in-law John Smith, brother-in-law Sam Smith, sister Mary Jane, who were married, who married Benjamin Williams. All these people were founders of Johnston County and Smithfield, stabilizing forces, along with a man named John Rand. They were heroes to many. Needham Bryan Jr. was the legislator that introduced the bill that chartered the town of Smithfield, and one of 5 Johnston legislators that helped write North Carolina's first constitution. He had been appointed, along with his brother William, as justices of the peace for Johnston County by Colonial Governor William Tryon himself. Needham had commanded in the Colonial militia in 1771 and had marched against the regulators at the Battle of Alamance Creek. His brother William had provided the staging ground for Tryon's troops just before the battle, and later was a brigadier general in the North Carolina militia during the Revolution. William Smith had married the sister of John Smith Jr., the namesake of Smithfield, by the way, and owner of the famous Smith's Ferry. And Sam Smith was also there and encouraged his fellow citizens to resist taxation without representation before the Revolution. William Smith, his wife, was also the sister of the wife of Benjamin Williams, Johnston's only person to become governor of North Carolina. William Bryan's son Lewis also represented Johnston County in the state legislature and voted against Smithfield becoming North Carolina state capital. Not that it really had any real chance, but he perhaps did so because it would upend Smithfield's and North Carolina's power structures as Smithfield had become the capital. But it is on this power structure that we see the connection to witchcraft trials in Salem, Massachusetts. Johnston's early power structure was also afraid. To them, the real danger was not outsiders, but insiders. The Bryans and Smiths and Williams, you see, were all slaveholders. In the 1760s, 61% of North Carolina's population was slave. And North Carolina landholders were scared to death of slave rebellions. Understandably so. There had been one in South Carolina. There had been one in Virginia. There are indications that the resistance was getting bolder. In 1768, in Johnston County, we had things called slave courts. Now, a case came up in slave court in 1768 where slaves Harry, Dick, and Cuff were accused in Smithfield of poisoning whites, which they admitted to. They had bought powder. They were told, or they gave it to their master, and they were told that they told the court that they were told that this powder would make him nicer to them. All it really did was make him sick. In 1779, a slave doctor named Bristow was found guilty in Johnston County Slave Court of giving slave women medicine to prevent them from getting pregnant so they wouldn't have to subject their children to a life of slavery, and so they can deny their slave master another piece of human property. In 1779, there was a trial of a slave named Jacob in Johnston County Courthouse in the slave courts. In this trial, another slave named Hannah, she was found guilty of trying to poison her mistress. I mean, people were afraid on both sides. To be a slave, I couldn't imagine. 2 years earlier, Needham Bryan died unexpectedly. He left a will in 1777. He left a will dividing his property, plantation, and slaves among his sons. In 1780, in January, his brother William and William's son Lewis were dead, and several family members had become sick. And standing accused was a slave named Jenny. She stood accused of poisoning them. Jenny was a slave of the Bryan family, but as she was a slave, she was not entitled to a court hearing. Instead, she was brought into slave court where 4 judges were present, and these judges could be just simple misdemeanor judges. Penalties for slaves were pretty severe, even for petty crimes. A slave committing perjury, for example, lying under oath, would be put in the stocks, his ears cut off, and 39 lashes, and all it took was for one free white man to say that a slave was lying. Whether he was or not, didn't matter, which would bring the penalty that came with perjury. So theoretically, a free white man could tell a slave to lie under oath, and if he didn't, the white man could tell the lie, and the slave tell the truth, and the slave loses ears anyway. Slaves lacked access to legal counsel. They were denied due process. And so on the 8th of November, 1780, Jenny stood accused of poisoning and killing 3 men of the Bryan family. 2 freemen testified in the trial. 3 other Bryan slaves, Juno, Patty Beck, Tracy, testified against her. 4 white jury members found her guilty. And the sentence? Execution. In a week. The method? Tie Jenny to a pole and burn her alive. On the green of the courthouse for the whole public to witness. Yes, Smithfield burned a person at the stake on the 18th of November, 1780, between the hours of 12 and 1 p.m. The people in Massachusetts never did that. In Europe, sure, but not in Massachusetts. Today, the spot that happened is on the lot of the Little Brown Jug. And on top of that, the Bryan family was compensated for the loss of their property by the taxpayers. We paid around £5,000 for the loss of their slave Jenny. Did the poisoning of 3 of the most prominent of Smithfield citizens require the burning of a live person? Absolutely not. Even if she did or didn't, no. But it wasn't that they wanted to punish Jenny. It's that they were terrified of slaves being emboldened. And they, Needham Bryan was the sheriff, and Benjamin Williams Jr. was on the jury. They felt that they needed to send a message. They weren't afraid of Jenny. They were afraid of others that might want to do the same. And that ends that episode, guys. As always, hope you learned something. I always learn something, and I love bringing it to you. That's what I do. And until next time, guys, be good.